Hello everyone, my name is Ewa Cybulska-Bohuszewicz, and today, after a quite long pause, I would like to briefly present, or rather announce, two huge books that we will be dealing with for some time. They will be Renaissance Chronicles again. One of them is the Polish Chronicle by Marcin Bielski, and the other is the Chronicle by Maciej Stryjkowski. But first of all, I would like to start my presentation. So I will share my screen. I will also stop my camera and full screen. And here we go. The Jagiellons and the Vasas in the Chronicles of Marcin, Joachim Bielski and Maciej Stryjkowski. And here we got Marcin and Joachim Bielski, Kronika Polska, Polish Chronicle, published in Kraków in 1597. And the next one, Maciej Stryjkowski's Kronika Polska, Litewska, Żmudzka i wszystkiej Rusi Kijowskiej, Chronicle of Polish, Lithuanian, Samogorsian and Old Kievan Rus, published in Königsberg in 1582. To be honest, today I will tell you about the first of them only initially. At the beginning, I would also like to say why I wanted to devote my next few presentations to this text. Well, these are the text, the first ones written in full in Polish, completely in Polish, because I do not take into account any minor, for example, Latin inserts, in which we find a description of the genesis of the Jagiellonian family. So, we find out where the dynasty really has its source. Of course, it is known that in Poland it is associated with the figure of King Władysław Jagiełło, because he is considered to be its founder. It was thanks to him that in the two countries connected through the Union, Poland, also known as the Crown or the Republic of Poland, Rzeczpospolita, and Lithuania, called in Polish Księstwo, ruled successively for many years or rather centuries, who contributed to the growing importance of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in Europe. Undoubtedly, the Jagiellonian dynasty issued the most powerful, most enterprising rulers who were able not only to maintain unity between two completely different nations, I mean very deep differences, very basic differences connected with culture, religion, and language. Therefore, it was neither easy nor obvious to maintain this unity. Relations between Poland and Lithuania were sometimes tense, and the fact of a so-called real and personal union is even today interpreted differently in Poland and Lithuania. This tension, however, can be noticed at the beginning of the dynasty reign. They are reflected by the sometimes difficult relations between King Jagiełło, King Władysław Jagiełło, and Prince Witold, described in detail in aforementioned Polish chronicles. The Polish Chronicle of Marcin Bielski, this writer is already known to you, is actually the work of his son Joachim, because it was he who took care of the edition and preparation of this work which was published, as I mentioned, in 1597, and therefore quite long after the death of Marcin, who passed away in 1575. When we look at this chronicle, we will see that it has some features in common with the Chronicle of Entire World, which I presented during a lecture devoted to this work. This can be seen especially in the graphic design. In both texts, there is a driving of the coat of arms of Poland, a magnificent eagle, which you may admire on this picture. When we look closely at it, we notice that there are various coats of arms on its body, representing the entire Republic of Poland. In the first edition of the Chronicle, however, the eagle was more modest. It was a smaller bird, which is the coat of arms of Sigismund August, and they are fancifully stylized initials of the king on the body of this eagle, as you can see. The later eagle, I mean this one from the 1564 edition, is of course more impressive. As Dariusz Śnieżko, who researched this chronicle, wrote a monograph devoted to the Chronicle of Entire World, claims that this eagle, which various coats of arms depicted on the body, on the one hand symbolize the power of Poland as a sovereign state, but in combination with a letter of dedication to the king, perhaps state the nature of this work. In general, the woodcuts in both chronicles, I mean both the Chronicle of Entire World and the Polish Chronicle, are very interesting, very elaborate, and worth attention. There is even a study on the art of woodcutting in Polish prints in the 16th and 17th centuries by Józef Muczkowski. This is quite old study from the 19th century, but is quite reliable. We can also find here some information about the engravings used by Bielski in both of his historical works. Dariusz Śnieżko also mentioned them in the latest edition of the Chronicle of Entire World, which was published in Szczecin about 2 years ago. I recommend this edition to your attention because it is really decent, with an introduction, indexes with explanations, and an index of geographical names. Complete edition of the entire chronicle in transcription from Old Polish, which makes reading much easier. What else, apart from some engravings, connect both chronicles? Well, both are dedicated to the king. The Chronicle of Entire World was dedicated to Sigismund August, the last of the Jagiellonian family, and the Polish Chronicle is dedicated to Sigismund Vasa III, who, although he started a new Vasa dynasty in Poland, was in this country perceived through the prism of his origin from the Jagiellons house. These ties with the Jagiellons were still very close here. Remember that Zygmunt August was the uncle of Sigismund Vasa III, son of the royal sister Katarzyna Jagiellonka, Catherine Jagiellon, and the Finnish prince and the Swedish king John Vasa. So these connections, these relationships were very close indeed. And here we have a fragment of preface to the Polish Chronicle, which is the letter to the King Sigismund Vasa I. This letter is written in Polish. This may be due to the fact that over time, Polish has become somewhat solidified and gradually and effectively supplanted Latin, although, of course, the entire 16th and 17th centuries also abound in text written in this language. We can therefore speak of two lines of writing in those times, in the native Polish language and in Latin, still recognized as a kind of model or pattern. And basically, this is where the similarities ends, because in terms of content, the Polish Chronicle discuss completely different issues that the Chronicle of entire world, which is a universal chronicle as opposed to a monographic chronicle describing only the history of Poland, which is apparent from the title. Although the author implies in the title that it is about Polish matters, the chronicle also includes fragments related to northern countries. For example, we have the preface detail in Polish. Najjaśniejszemu Zygmuntowi III, z łaski Bożej królowi polskiemu, wielkiemu księciu litewskiemu, ruskiemu, pruskiemu, mazowieckiemu, żmudzkiemu, inflanckiemu i dziedzicznemu królowi szwedzkiemu, księciu finlandzkiemu. In English, Sigismund III, by the grace of God, the Polish king, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, Ruthenian, Prussian, Mazovian, Samogitian, Livonian, and hereditary Swedish king and the Finnish prince. So, in this preface, we find the connections of Polish king with the north, with Sweden and with Finland. I would like to tell you a bit about them, about these fragments related to northern countries, and more specifically to focus on the origin of the Polish nation, on how Bielski presents it here and how he links Poles with the people of the north. In the Chronicle of Entire World, there is a paragraph or rather chapter about the Polish kingdom, but this is quite different from what we may find in the Polish Chronicle. It presents the history of the Polish nation from the very beginning, arranged in the form a kind of collection of successive kings of Poland. I would like to devote some space to how the Chronicle describes Poles because it is quite interesting. Well, at the beginning of his work, he refers to the Sarmatian myth. He describes Poles as de facto Sarmatians. According to Bielski, Sarmatians are people with lizard eyes. What, according to the author, corresponds to the etymology of the word Sarmatian. This is what Bielski writes about it. The Polish kingdom is located in Europe, in the third part of the world, in the land of Saromaci, from people with lizard eyes so mentioned, because of the fact that a lizard means Sauros and Ioma means an eye, how we can interpret in when translating from Greek to Polish. Hence, it means that these people were always terrible to our world. Another term for Sarmatians that appears in the chronicle is northern people, which the authors presents as stronger than those from the south, due to the fact that the northern lands where the legendary Sarmatians lived were to be cold, and thus their inhabitants were to be more resilient, more resistant and stronger, used to bad weather and inconvenience. Bielski described these people also as a great warriors, referring to ancient sources, namely Ovid, who was to present the Sarmatians as a fearless people. Neither God nor the power of Rome are afraid of. Very brave, able to survive in extremely unfavorable conditions. For example, they traveled with large crops to the other side or ice-bound rivers or even Baltic Sea, led a barbaric lifestyle. Bielski says that they are grubego życia or grubego żywota. In Polish, the Old Polish adjective gruby, which today are interpreted as fat in English, meant something completely different in the 16th century. As you can see here, gruby means uncivilized, barbarian, and as an example of this barbarian style of life, Bielski mentions that they, for example, drink horse blood mixed with milk. For this reason, they were to arouse fear through Europe. They also never allowed themselves to be defeated or conquered, even by other barbarians. Bielski mentions the Vandals and the Goths as people related to Sarmatians, which is interesting for our consideration because, according to Bielski, the Swedish and Finnish people were also descended from such ancestors. The chronicler claims that the Swedes and Finns are related to the Sarmatians through the Wenedowie in Polish, tribal, which was supposed to correspond with the Goths. Interestingly, in Finnish, Karelian, and Swedish language, the word Veneti meant rather Slavs, but from the area of Russia. Separate chapters of the first book of this chronicle are devoted by the chronicler to the primal tribals that were to form the Polish nation. So, Bielski mentions the Veneti, but of course also the Goths, whom he describes as originally a tribal hostile to the Veneti. Later, however, as a result of historical changes and alliances, the Goths were to penetrate the territory of today's Poland and join the Slavic tribals. This is in line with modern arrangements. It is known that Polish territories were actually visited by visitors from the north. The historian also described the Goths as great warriors and very brave people, bagging numerous battles, for example, in Italy. They managed, for example, to conquer Rome for some times. Bielski mentioned also about the battles in Spain. Bielski presents the Goths and Sarmatians as the only tribals that were able to realistically threaten Rome's independence. He claims that Rome trembled against Sarmatian or Gothic invasions from the time of Emperor Augustus. What else do these two warrior tribals have in common? The Goths descended, as did the Sarmatians, from Noah's sons Japhet, specifically from Noah's grandson Magog. Later, descent from Japhet was in Poland associated with being a nobleman, with a noble descent in opposition to the descendants of Ham, perceived pejoratively, which is justified in the Bible. Ham laughed at drunk Noah, who laid naked in his tent and was cursed for it by his father. Describing the gods, Bielski refers to ancient sources, but also to the newer ones, including those by Jordanes, the author of the famous Getica, also known in Poland. You may ask, why does Bielski mention all these tribals and at all, and why does he do it in great details? Let us remember to whom the chronicle is dedicated. To Sigismund Vasa, who is perceived as a descendant of the brave Sarmatians on his mother's side and the invincible Goths on his father's side. That's why the chronicle devotes so much space to these issues to even more honor the king, whose progenitors were not one, but two excellent people. I mean, of course, Catherine Jagiellon and John Vasa. So the Polish chronicle is a kind of apotheosis of King Sigismund, who was a descendant of great tribals, the brave Sarmatians from the side of mother, and the fearless Goths and Vandals on the side of his father, John. Okay. This is it. Today I told you a bit about Sigismund III and his relationship with the chronicle dedicated to him, but also about his connection with the north, with the primary tribals living in the north, with Goths and with Vandals. My next presentation will be devoted a bit closer to the royal house of the Jagiellons. Thank you for your attention and see you next time.